The concept of resilience is something that really intrigues me. I think it's often, to be honest, a bit of an overused word. We hear things like, "Oh, isn't he resilient?" or "Oh, he's showing great signs of resilience," and we walk away and give ourselves a pat on the back and say we're ever so resilient, like it's a badge of honor. But then I sat back and I thought, well, what does it actually really mean? Is it a skill? Is it something we can train? Is it something that we're born with, and that's the amount of resilience we have? So what does it all mean? We're here to unravel it, discuss it, explore it, and hopefully give a few tips, takeaways, and ideas that we can use in our daily lives moving forward from a guest expert on the topic of resilience. Josh Connolly is a resilience coach, so I'm looking forward to finding out what one of those does. He encourages people to become more self-aware, so connecting with ourselves in order to become more resilient. And I'm really excited personally to dig into that because I think I'll get lots of application off it as well. So, Josh, thank you for jumping on with us this morning. Really appreciate you taking the time to do so. Give us a brief intro about who you are, what you do, who you're helping, where you're from.
So I'm from a place called Royal Wootton Bassett, which is in Wiltshire, near Bristol. We joke it's between Bristol and Swindon, where I live. Um, and yeah, look, you said that I'm a resilience coach. What I mean by that is that I work with organizations to help them to develop what I would say is a sort of a more real and true understanding of what resilience truly means. If I'm being completely candid and honest with you, if I'd have started this work now as opposed to sort of 6 or 7 years ago when I did, maybe I would be a burnout coach, right? What I mean by that is that I think all of these things are linked, and often the work in the end behind it all does come back to this piece about self-awareness. And so, like I say, I've worked with brands all over the world over the years now, some of the biggest brands in the world. To help people really come back to themselves. And I'm sure we'll get into how I truly see resilience, but I love the way that you just introed us there, because I do think the word gets thrown about a lot. And I think actually, and this is what I discover in all of my sessions, people when pushed don't really know what they mean when they say be resilient. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's an intro. There's a lot of buzzwords knocking around in this sort of well-being and personal development space, and I'm sure they're all very well-meaning, but they are overused, I think, quite a little bit. And interesting early catch that you relate burnout to resilience. Are the two related? Do you think?
I just think that, when we talk about the buzzwords that, like you've just said, that get thrown about in the kind of well-being space, I've just noticed over the years that when you interact with people, the kind of what they're looking for changes and seems to follow these themes. So, it was resilience at the beginning, and then there was burnout. I think a lot of people are talking about stress, seems to
Mm,
be quite common now. But I just think that I think they're all related, right? Because I think behind it all, in the end, what we're really talking about is how well do you know yourself, right? And how do you discover and find ways to get your needs met so that you can tackle and be whatever your role is. So I do think that they're all interlinked in the end, and sometimes we hear that top line word, but ultimately when I look at the sessions that I deliver on resilience, you could call them burnout and I could change the word in and they would be exactly the same,
the
apart from
same
maybe looking at
symptoms.
the same symptoms with often the same solutions.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. And give us a bit, Josh, about, if you don't mind, around your background. Because I'm a big fan of your content. I really think what you do talk about and share so openly on your socials is very well, it's very inspiring to others to engage. It's almost giving permission for them to engage it as well. You talk about taboo topics, the toxic parents, for example. Um, why do we not talk honestly? Do you think what stigmas exist that prevent us embracing resilience, avoiding burnout? Call it what you
Y-
want.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We say the word stigma. Now, stigma, I think stigma absolutely exists, right? But I think often when we talk about a fear of stigma, right, what we're saying is, I'm sort of scared of how people will judge me. And how often does that fear of people judging us come from the fact that they actually will judge us? And how often does it come from the fact that we judge ourselves so harshly, so we assume that everybody else will? So what I mean by that is, I think times have changed a lot when it comes to stigma. in the past, I grew up at a very difficult time in my younger life. And then in my early adult life, I found life very, very difficult. I used alcohol and other substances, to be honest with you, to escape. I worked in a factory full of mainly men, and you didn't talk about struggling, right? Nobody talked about struggling. You worked hard, you did long hours, and you sort of played hard as a result. And I think there was a lot of us there that were struggling. I think when I look, having fast forwarded to where we are now, I talk way more openly about the struggles that I face. And in the large and on the whole, I've received love and support and very little stigma, which I think is quite interesting, right?
Mm.
Because we always say there's stigma. If I talk, people are going to judge me. And the more that I've talked openly, actually, the more, in most cases, the more sort of support and love I've received,
And does that talking openly help you as well? Does it help you almost reinforce your own identity? Does it help you overcome whatever you're dealing with in your own thinking by talking about it? Is it that old classic problem shared is a problem halved sort of thing?
I think initially in the early days, like my life, so I got sober just coming up 12 years ago. And I think in that initial phase, it was really important for me. I'd lived a lie all my life, right? I'd pretended to be tough and like hard exterior and nothing affects me. And the opposite was true. So in the early years, I think talking openly on a one-to-one basis, but then on the platforms that I've created and stuff, I think that did really, really help me. I think it has less of an impact on me today, because I'm sort of more true to myself on a day-to-day basis. So today when I share, it's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not strategic, but I do it more because I'm that piece around permission that you talked about.
Mm.
I'm willingly and actively trying to give people permission. And I think that's how you create a lot of change, actually, is when anyone is honest about their own situation, it gives people permission to be honest about theirs.
Well, you have to lead by example, don't you, in the position that you've taken? And I guess, yeah, strategic, deliberate, you're using it to create and
Deliberate's the
spark
word.
conversation, right?
Mm,
And you said something interesting there about we do it to fit in. And I think that's a really interesting angle, especially for men. I find that we have to be a part of a pack and we have to fit in somewhere. I think
mm,
from my sort of social circle, if you like, I was probably one of the first through redundancy to start working for myself, going back sort of 8 years or so now. And it was very difficult because you're right, you can't, and I talk about it often in other conversations where everything has to be fine. It's like, you go home, it's like, how's work been? It's fine. You go to the pub with your mate. Oh, how's work been? Is it all right? Working for yourself when you're going to get a proper job, all that sort of stuff. It's like, oh yeah, it's fine, even though it isn't. And you always have to play this role, if you like, that unless you're Richard Branson or Elon Musk, you can't work for yourself because you're not a millionaire. Or, oh, you
mm,
work for yourself, you must be minted. It's like, well, actually, no, I don't know how I'm going to pay next month's mortgage yet, but I can't speak about it.
mm.
So we internalize so much. And I just think that almost makes us pretend we're someone that we aren't, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah. And people often project their own sort of fears and worries onto you, don't they? So like, I do think when you start working for yourself, I certainly noticed that in some social circles, people like sort of struggle with it a little bit. If you like, people will kind of take the mickey out of you. I don't know,
Yeah.
if you're daring to post online, for example, you're daring to put yourself out online, not just to be vulnerable, but to promote your business, which even that is to be vulnerable, right? Is to put something that you've created out there and show it to the world and say, I'm actively trying to do this. And I think a lot of people have fear around that, and so when you do it, they project that fear onto you, and that normally comes in judgment in some of the ways that you just talked about. But I think there's also like a sort of yearning to belong, isn't there?
Mm.
People want to belong. They want to feel part of something. But when I look at that from like emotional expression, I was always scared to talk about how I felt and say the things that I was struggling with. But I think when I started doing it authentically, I was surprised at how many people. I mean, I don't mix, I don't mix necessarily nowadays with the people that I used to since I stopped drinking and all stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I see them and I might bump into them. And sometimes I think, oh, I'm bumping into someone I've not seen since my drinking days. And I think they're going to be a little bit like, who do you think you are? But in a lot of cases, they've been actually more like, maybe like not necessarily always explicitly, but they have gave me a little bit of acknowledgement that, yeah, I've
Mm.
struggled too, and that they appreciate that I'm speaking about it.
But it takes I guess, a bold step to be different in that respect, doesn't it? When you're employed, there's nothing wrong with being employed whatsoever, but you're in much more security. You know exactly what's coming. It's expected of you. When you're working for yourself and you're the first one out of your circle to do so, you do have to think a bit differently, and that does challenge you a little bit. And there's times when it feels very lonely. I don't know how you felt, but very lonely. It's like, oh my God, why am I doing this?
Oh
Why
yeah,
on earth am I doing this? And it must challenge what I guess I came to figure is resilience. It
yeah,
must, that little poke and poke and poke. Should be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. When you're going to get a proper job? Oh, what are you doing that for? And you're right about the social thing
mm,
as well. Yeah, we were working with an organization just this week, and big part of posting on LinkedIn is I don't want to be a show off. It's like, well, it's not about showing off. It's
yeah,
about just stepping up and showing something a bit different. But
yeah.
we're so scared of what others perceive or think, it stops us from doing anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think like people of a certain age as well, when they look at social media, people that have grown up a certain amount of their life without social media,
Mm,
they forget that social media really, like, when they say I don't want to show off, it's a bit like saying to somebody that opens a shop to sell something in, right? That they're showing off. Well, in some ways, that's exactly what they are doing, right? They've opened a shop to try and get people to come in it to see if
yeah,
they value what they're selling so that they can buy it. And ultimately, that is what social media is at its core, right? When you're a business owner and you're using social media in that way. So, like, I think I think people struggle with that in general if they've lived a different life. But to come back to to your earlier point as well about the kind of feeling on your own and people's perceptions of when you go out and start working for yourself. I grew up with I took on as a young adult my stepdad's fears. So my stepdad's a great guy, still very close to him. He's done well, been a very good, hardworking man all of his life. He's a bricklayer. I think sometimes he had his own gangs and stuff like that, bricklaying gangs in times like that. But he drilled into me ultimately some of his own fears, which was
mm,
get a trade. You'll never be out of, make sure you do this. Get working as quick as you can, work for someone else and get earning, start putting money but aside, save. And it was all about that. And so like you say, I really had to kind of break a mold of my life to go, actually, no, I'm going to risk it all. I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to risk it all and go out for myself. Um, and to link that, sorry, I know I'm rabbiting on here a little bit, but to link that to resilience in the way that you said, and maybe this is where we can sort of highlight what I mean with resilience. I really had to begin to understand myself. I had to really see my worries. I had to be with my concerns and make sure that I was looking at ways to create resources in my life so that when I felt depleted, I knew that I would be able to bounce back. And not every time that I depleted did I realize it was the end, or think that it
mm.
was the end.
Yeah, and yeah, you mentioned early on, you just referenced it there, that as society, you almost think that we've lost sight of ourselves.
Mm.
What do you mean by that? Because you've kind of just referenced it there. It's like we don't really know who we are. We're always playing up to be someone else or portray ourselves as something else. Have we, as a society, lost our way, lost sight of ourselves, and what's gone wrong?
Yeah, look, I wonder if it's a case of it's always been a little bit like that, and maybe the world that we live in today, this sort of hyper connected online social media world, it like exasperates that a bit. But if you like simplify the journey of our life, right? When you reach 5 years old, you're sent to school and you're essentially told that you'll be of no value to this world unless you work really, really hard and conform and do and go through this certain path, right? So we're sort of taught that. And then, we're fed adverts from a very young age that tell you, you need this, you're not good enough without this and without that. And so I think we gain a sense of ourselves based on all of these messages that we're fed for everybody from everybody else. And then we set about trying to be needed and wanted and likable, right? And I think at some point in your life, you have to go, hang on a minute, let me put down all these messages that I've given and let me really try and connect with who I am and find myself. And I think that happens like zoomed out on a societal level. But if we bring it back to the resilience and the well-being that I'm talking about, a lot of the messages around well-being, mental health, whatever you want to call it, they're all sort of like a one size fits all. If you're
Mm,
struggling, reach out, right? If you're struggling, talk to somebody. Like, we're all different. If I'm really overwhelmed and emotionally full, I actually need to carve a little bit of time on my own. I need to start there, but then I need to be aware enough to know that I can't stay here, because if I stay on my own, it will turn into isolation.
mm,
So I build these little processes in my life today where a good example of that, right? And this is a strategy that works for me, is when I finish my working day, whether I've been out delivering sessions or at the office on my own, I make sure I get at least 15 to 20 minutes. Doesn't matter what that is, but when I get home, I create a transition period where I'm on my own, where I get to put down I don't go straight into the kitchen and into the work environment, sorry, the home environment and interacting. Everybody knows I go in, I go upstairs, I put my bag in a certain place and I do a little process. And then, that's what I need. Now that might sound crazy to some people, but to me, it's exactly what I need,
mm.
and I think we all need to find those pockets of what works for us.
Yeah, because if not, life, I guess, is just happening at us, isn't it? I've got three kids at home. Like I said, just away yesterday for work, parked up on the drive, got out the car. Obviously, not seeing the kids. The kids come out, and that's it. I'm on the street playing. There is no shift like you've just mentioned. The concept of transitions really interests me. I think it's probably something that's quite important to do. But again, it sounds like another buzzword. And I think there's some real importance to it, to
Mm,
stop and think, well, what do you want to do? And we're so busy, so
yeah.
busy. We often lose sight. And I'm really glad you mentioned it early on. We lose sight of ourselves. When
Mm,
I first started working for myself, when I first became a dad, I can think of time and time again. I found myself saying, I remember when, or I used to enjoy things like that. And we'd self we talk ourselves out of doing the things that are good for us for the benefit of everyone else.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
be important to ring fence some time for us, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I do, by the way, and I think a lot of working dads um have done a lot of that, of what you've just talked about, right? Which is, and I think sometimes we find it hard to vocalize that, but we lose a bit of who we are because
Mm,
we're so busy, like particularly in today's life, right? And I'm not saying this is wrong. In fact, I think it's better that it's like this, right? But whether stereotypically this is right or wrong, like I want to go out and provide and really earn for my family, right? And I want to be a really good and present dad, right? So when I'm home, like you say, when the kids come running out, I want to be present. I want to be with
mm,
them. I want to give myself to them. I want to put down everything from work. And if we're not careful, we're sort of carrying so much it from day to day to day, all of the time. We're not carving those little moments out for ourselves where, like, who am I behind that? I don't want to over identify with who I am at work. I want space for being the dad and the husband that I am, and I want to be me as well. I want to be Josh,
mm.
and some of that for me is like, for example, I love football. Yeah, love football. I love going to football and letting off a bit of steam when I watch football. And so I've worked on that and allowed that to evolve and change as I've got into my adulthood. I used to have a difficult relationship with how angry I used to get at football. Now I take my youngest daughter and we joke, because if the ref makes a bad decision, I shout something and call him a sausage, right? So then it's like funny, but I'm still letting off a bit of steam
Yeah.
and I'm still doing it, right? And these things are really important, because if we lose who we are behind all of what we need to be for the people around us, it becomes problematic, because then what happens when you take these things away?
Mm. There's nothing left, right?
When the kids move out, when I start reaching retirement age, I need to know who I am. I
Mm,
need to know who I am, you know? Not just at that age, but if my wife takes the kids away on the weekend and I'm not working, who am I? What am I going to do? Am I going to veg out in front of the telly because I don't know who I am or what I enjoy? Or do I have things in my life to pick up and go, I'm going to be Josh for the day, you know? I think it's
mm.
important, man.
It's, you raise a really good point. Yeah, if the missus takes the kids away, which you probably strive for a bit of time. Oh, just get them out. I need some space for me. I need some space for me. Okay, cool. I'll take the kids away. Door shut. Well, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So bored.
Yeah.
I'll just go on my phone and waste time.
Mm.
Yeah. So how can we start, Josh? And around, because obviously the getting to know yourself, the awareness piece connects very nicely to the resilience element as well. Before we define what you think resilience is, how can we start to identify better with ourselves or check in with ourselves? Because it sounds like for you it was a purposeful choice. I'm doing this. For myself, it was redundancy, which put me into working for myself. Do we all need that almost like, for want of a better word, sob story to find out who we are? Or how can regular Joe just connect better with who they are?
You, it's a really good. I really like the way you frame the question. Because I think if I'm being gut level honest and really truthful, the unfortunate thing is that most of us won't act until there's a real pain point. Yeah, and that's a real shame. And
Mm,
it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. Um, and I think really to answer the question, it's about you need to create space in your life every day for yourself, right? So I get up really early in the morning. Now, it's like getting up early in the morning and having a morning routine has got a little bit sort of stigmatized in recent years because it was like there was a lot of people online saying if you get up at 3, then everyone else is asleep and you've done 4 hours work before
it's a
anybody else.
power thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
not like grind working harder than everybody else. And listen, if that works for people, by the way, I think it's great and I think they should do it. But that's not why I do it. I've got children. Um, and in the evenings, our life is all geared towards the kids, and then I get a bit of time with my wife after the kids are in bed, and then the day's over. So I get up at 5 in the morning. I have a coffee on my own, right? And the reason I do it at 5 is because that's when everybody's asleep. Then I go to the gym on my own, and I very purposely I'm not looking to interact with people at the gym. Headphones are on. It's my self-reflective space. I do a bit of checking in with myself. And then I start my working day with a little bit of journaling and self-reflection. Not loads. I'm talking like 5 minutes
Mm,
often when I get to the office or on the train or whatever's going on. Um, and I think a lot of us hear these concepts and think, oh, it's a great concept. I can see how it would work, but we never do it. And we never do it long enough for it to take hold.
mm,
So, like if you wanted to build muscle at the gym, go into the gym once in the morning and then come into me and saying, Josh, I went and I don't feel any different. I said, well, you've been once. You need to go for a couple of months. And what you'll notice is if you do, people will say to you before you really truly see, people will say, well, have you been working out? Yeah. And it's the same with your morning routine, right? In that routine of looking after yourself people will notice a change in you before you notice in yourself. And
mm.
often we don't even put it to the morning routine. We just think, wow, how amazing that things are going so well. And it's not till we drop it, same as the gym. If you drop the gym, you end up going back when you look in the mirror and you think, oh my God, I would let
Yeah.
myself go again or whatever. And it's the same thing, man. It's like a muscle.
So if we can't find 2, 3 hours in the morning, how much time are we talking literally, could a 5 minute snap just to ourselves help? Just to see what we want to do? What are we happy with where we're at? Because people might be busy, they might work at 6 in the morning, they don't want to get up at 3, they don't want to do all that. How much time do we need to ourselves? Is there
Yeah,
a
yeah.
definitive around that?
No, there's nothing definitive around it. What I would say is that everybody can build 5 or 10 minutes in, right? I always say I've never met anybody that doesn't brush their teeth because they don't have enough time, right? Or I might have met a couple, but
Yeah.
that doesn't really happen. Yeah, people make that time to brush their teeth because they know the importance of it. But you can build 5 or 10. Now, listen, I get up in the morning because I've got kids and I'm a morning person. Yeah, by the night time, I'm just one of them who wants to go to bed early. Yeah, if you're a night owl, you might do it when everyone's gone to bed.
Yeah.
Right? You might sit in bed and do that. Like, um, It might be 5-10 minute journaling exercise when you get to work, just before you start work. It might be on the train, on the bus. It might be in the car. You're going to turn the radio off or whatever you listen to in the car, or you're going to put some calming sounds on in there, and you're going to reflect while you're driving.
Mm.
But I think the intention is the important piece here, the intention to reflect, and you'll learn a lot.
I agree. I think that intention, Pete, deciding to do something is very important. We don't necessarily all need the sob story, but make an intention to check in with yourself a little bit, because it does, in a roundabout way, connect to how resilient you are. And I guess, Josh, it'd be good to try and dig into that a little bit. And on the topic of resilience, what is your definition of it? Because as we mentioned in the introduction, it's a bit of a buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your definition and positioning of resilience?
Mm-hmm. So the definition, if we look in the dictionary, is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, and then it uses this word toughness. Now, I always like to separate toughness as being part of our resilience, right? But it's a separate part. And actually, what I find is that most people, when they talk about resilience, they're actually talking about toughness and grit. They'll say things like, you need to keep going. It's about endurance and about how long you can last and how much you show up. There's a bit of that, right? But our overall resilience needs to look quite different. And the way that I would structure this is to say, if you think of a tough material as being something like a hard plastic, right? The strength in a hard plastic, right? The reason that it's good and we use it is because it takes a lot of impact, takes a lot of adversity, and it stays fixed and strong exactly as you need it. It's tough, yeah? The problem with a hard plastic is enough adversity, too much adversity, and that plastic will snap. And once it snaps, you can't use it no more, right? It's useless. It's no good in its original form. So long term and overall, we need to be more like elastic, right? The strength in elastic is that it can bend, it can distort, and it moves out of shape. And the strength lies in the fact that it can return to its original form. Now, we need both. This is really important. I think toughness has got a bad rap actually in today's world. And what people, people tend to like be a bit turned off by the term toughness. I absolutely believe that if you want to be successful in any aspect of your life, in career, if you want to move through your career, if you want to be successful as a dad, or whatever else it is, whatever your endeavor is, you're going to need to be tough. You're going to need to stay fixed and strong in moments in spite of yourself. Yeah. I think the key thing is to become aware enough of when you've been toughing it out. When I come home and my body's tense and I think, cool, that was a tough day. Am I just going to try and push that back down and pretend that when I'm with my kids, I'm all right and I'm not stressed? Or am I going to do something about it? Am I going to say, I'm stressed and overwhelmed here, and it's not selfish for me to buy an hour here, right? Or to make sure that I'm going to buy an hour tomorrow. That's not selfish. In fact, it's probably the most selfless thing I could do, because it would be easy to push it down. And here's what I think most people do. And it's been my experience in interacting with people, is most people hold it together when they're at work, and they give their work colleagues the best possible version of themselves that they can. And then they go home and take all of the difficult emotion and energy that they've stored up in their bodies. They go and take it out on the people that they care about the most. They're shouting at their kids when they should have been more assertive in that meeting, for example. So that's not resilience. That's toughing it out and redirecting that difficult energy. And so in my case, I do a lot of breath work as well, but like the gym and things like that, when I go to the gym, that ain't about aesthetically trying to look different, although I'm sure that comes into it in my mind. It's about releasing and getting rid of energy, letting it come out of my body so that I'm in control of it. Otherwise, it comes out of me sideways,
Yeah, interesting about the gym. You see so many that just go just to look pretty, but I just like to like you. I like to go on my own, stick my headphones in, and just get myself in a big mess.
Yeah.
No one ever regretted going to the gym after they've left. I don't think.
No, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you're absolutely right. I've fallen very much into that trap of had a busy day, stressful day, put all my energy into work, gone home, and you're stressed at the kids, and then you go to bed after. You say, "Oh, you think, oh, I could have done that differently. I should have handled that a bit better." And I like that toughness. Toughness is okay. Yeah, you almost have to be tough.
Yeah.
But again, there's elements around that tough is bad. Tough is non-empathetic. tough is arrogant, selfish, and there's some real negative connotations around it. But tough, as you said, is okay. In fact, you said it's needed, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely is needed. Like, and I think the biggest mistake that we've made in the last sort of decade or so, maybe a couple of decades, is that we've tried to say people struggle when they're under too much stress. So the solution is to remove stress. And stress is coming. Like, I hear people say these like completely unrealistic things, like one of the most common ones I hear is like, if it costs your mental health, you know, if it costs your well-being, it costs your mental health, then it's too expensive, right? And I think, well, if that's true, no one would have kids.
Yeah.
But it's true, right? Because the first 2 years, I don't care what anybody says, it's full of amazing moments, right? And it's also full of some of test any relationship, the best relationship. It's hard, man. In the world that we live in today, you've been up all night and you've got to go to work. Don't tell me you haven't got to be tough. Don't tell me you haven't got to be tough. And if you want to build a dynasty, if you want to be successful, I haven't built the business that I've built through no toughness,
Mm. By
through
just letting it happen. Yeah.
by just
Yeah.
letting by being all love and light, and like, be just being like, whenever I felt too stressed, I've stopped. Nah, like
Mm.
I have to go into the red zone sometimes. And the difference from today and in my past life is I know when I'm in the red zone and I'm not lying to myself. And I might go, listen, I want to get this project done by the end of next week. So I'm in the red zone for a couple of weeks. And what I'm going to do is at the end of that 2 weeks, I'm building in 2 days where I come away completely. And that's
Mm.
really vital and important that I do that. But if I want to be successful in what I'm doing, I need to be in the red zone here. The difference in that, right, is in the past, I used to go, I'm not in the red zone. I don't know what you're talking about. And being angry with everybody and shouting at my kids and not knowing why it was happening because I was just saying I'm all right all of the time. It's being aware. Yeah, I'm right under the cosh at the moment. And actually, I'm playing a bit of the long game here. But let me make sure I'm building in some things here. Let me make sure I'm building in. Let me make sure that if I have got 2 weeks of absolute hecticness, if I have to do the 7 days a week because of what's going on with my business, and if you're doing working for yourself, sometimes you need that. Let me make sure Sunday morning, 6 till 12, everything's off and I'm carving out that time.
Mm.
You have to be real and realistic, I think. And that's really important.
Yeah, so you're busy not in spite of, you're busy for a bigger purpose. And I like that. The sort of I know I get in the red zone. It happens. We can't just turn this blind eye and be like, oh well, it'll be fine, it'll work itself out. You've got to drive things sometimes, haven't you? And you're absolutely right with what you say. And I saw I think it was a post of yours on social media, and it made me stop scrolling. I thought, you talk about good mental health being a trap. And I just wonder what you mean by that, because I think you alluded to some of it a bit there. And I just wonder, I think it connects nicely to what we're talking about. So what do
Yeah,
you mean
look,
by that?
when we talk about mental health, right, I always say to people, what do you mean? What like really, what does mental health mean? And people go, well, if I'm in good mental health, then I'm dealing with everything and I'm like, no, what you mean if you're in good mental health is everything in your life is all right at the moment. But that's not life. Like, I think we have to be really careful that if um if things in our life are difficult and we're going through a difficult time and we're under a lot of stress and we're under a lot of pressure, if I feel anxious and overwhelmed as a result of that, my body's doing exactly what it should do to try and motivate me to change my circumstances and the scenarios that I find myself in. If I say I'm struggling with my mental health when things aren't going my way, I'm doing myself a complete disservice. I'm not struggling with my mental health. I'm struggling with my life circumstances, and that's completely appropriate. And
Mm,
so I think what we've done is we have, like, with the conversation accidentally, and it's all well-meaning, but if we're not careful, we've we've determined now that if I feel good, I've got good mental health, and if I feel bad, irrespective of why I feel crap, then it's bad mental health or it's poor mental health. Like, of course, there is mental illness when people cross into a state where You know,
Yeah.
they're beside themselves for whatever reason. But when I look at my old situation, I know this is a long answer here, but when I look at my old situation when I worked in a factory, right? I'd worked my way up through the organization. I was transport manager there. And I hated my job. I hated it. Like I dreaded it every day, right? The money that I was earning was just enough to survive. So I'd come home and the washing machine, I remember the washing machine used to squeak. And I used to think, my wife used to say, I think that washing machine's going to pack up. And I used to think, I can't have that pack up. I haven't got the money for that to pack up now.
Mm.
I need that washing machine to not pack up. And now I've got to go back to this place that I hate the next day, right? And I hated it. It ruined my weekends. You know, it wasn't the Sunday dreads. It was I'd finish Friday, maybe get Friday night, and then Saturday I'm thinking about work on Monday. So I
Yeah.
could go to the doctor and say, man, I feel like I'm really struggling with my mental health. He could say, why? What do you feel like? I say, I'm anxious all of the time. I feel down. I feel like there's no hope for me. I had no qualifications, right? Didn't know how to leave my job. Now, if he said, how long have you felt like this? I could say, probably at least a year. Oh my God, well, this is like really poor mental health, right? And then I could have potentially been medicalized as a result of that,
Mm.
right? Or or I could go, I feel awful. I need to do something. And what I did is I said to my wife, it's my job. If I could change my job, I wouldn't feel like this. But I've got no qualifications. How am I going to earn this sort of money? So I volunteered with a charity to find a bit of purpose and hopefully start maybe training. If I volunteer my own time, maybe I could train as a volunteer. And then one thing led to another. And before I know it, I'd left my job. And those feelings of anxiety, look, they haven't completely dissipated, but
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not bound by them anymore. So my body and the way that I felt was doing exactly what it should do, which is scream at me and say, your life circumstances are wrong. Do something about it.
Something needs to change. And there's a risk perhaps that by bundling good mental health with bad mental health, those that have got actual mental health problems are almost getting lost in the wash because everyone's now got bad mental health. Whereas the ones that have bad mental health are getting ignored potentially.
And it really waters down the conversation. Right.
Yes, yeah,
And and
that's I
and
think that's it. Yeah.
and let's be clear here, right? Anybody that is suffering in the way that I was in my old job, I'm not for a moment suggesting that how I felt wasn't real, or
Mm,
that it wasn't painful and that it wasn't unbearable, right? I'm not for a second suggesting that anybody's pain, distress, discomfort is not real. I'm just questioning whether framing it as poor mental health or struggling with my mental health is the right thing to do. Because let's just quickly bring that scenario into your career. If you're early in your working life, right, and you're trying to move up the ladder to the next rung on your career, which is what we try to do in our life, right? That's the way that we live. Um, if you're under a lot of pressure and it's really stressful, and you start going, "Oh my God, I'm struggling with my mental health here," when actually maybe you need somebody around you to go, "No, no, no, this is tough, man. Stick at it, right? Do what you can. It's going to be hard. You're going to be under pressure. You're going to feel like you're giving things up. But if you do it, you're going to get to the next rung and you're not
mm,
struggling with your mental health. You're struggling because you're trying to build and be something special. And that comes with struggle and discomfort." You see the difference here? Like there's a big
mm.
difference. And I think it's important to really highlight appropriate emotions. And I worry, my worry is that appropriate emotions are being framed as mental health because how we feel emotionally and mentally is nothing like our physical health. People say mental health is just as important as physical health. It's not the same at all. It's not the same at all. You know, it's not the same at all. Because if I'm in a marriage that I hate, if you're in a marriage that you hate, it doesn't matter how many times you go to the gym, it ain't going to work. So it's nothing like physical health.
Yeah.
It's nothing like it. And to compare the two, I actually don't think you should separate the two because the body doesn't. I think we should look at ourselves as humans and whole humans
Yeah.
and work out from there. So I think it's problematic in so many ways. Yeah.
Uh, and I guess it goes back, joining a few dots, what you've been saying here around us making our own decisions as well, because you're absolutely right what you say. There is the risk that there is that dreaded toxic positivity over here. Keep going, you can do it, you can do it. If you want to, you can. Whereas likewise is the person, well, don't do anything because your mental health needs to be nurtured and looked after. And so there's someone looking here and looking here, thinking, oh my God, what's right for me? And it probably circles right back around to the beginning, saying we've lost sight of ourselves. We don't know what we want. I'm hearing this guy here saying he's getting up at 3 in the morning, and if you're not doing that, you're a failure. And I've got this person over here saying you need to do your mental health, and if you get too busy or stressed, just stop. It's like, my God,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
wonder we're in a pickle, is it? It's
Yeah.
just, it's
Exactly.
unbelievable.
Because where do you sit on that? It's yeah, so true.
Yeah, well, what is your decision? What do you
Mm.
want to? Well, I don't know. What would everyone else do? Oh my God, I can't do anything. And then we get inertia and do nothing, and then get stressed that we've done nothing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's an incredibly difficult situation. I mean, just on that resilience bit, and back to ourselves and our decisions. Is resilience a muscle, like you mentioned? Is it something we can train? Are we born as resilient as we will ever be? Let's start thinking about some ideas, thoughts around what we can do to improve or test our resilience. How do we know our resilience scale?
Well, look, I think like we learn about it by how we test it. There's absolutely no doubt about it, right? You're going to learn about yourself when you put yourself in discomfort.
Hmm.
And so, like, if you think once upon a time, we used to sort of push people to do that, right? Stretch out of your comfort zone. If you want to be successful, you need to get out of your comfort zone. And there's truth in that.
Hmm.
There's truth in that. So we do need to stretch, right? If you think about the elastic uh, metaphor that I brought earlier, you
Hmm.
test elastic by stretching it, seeing how far it can stretch. And by the way, when you look at it, you can start to see, okay, we're reaching its limit here.
Yeah.
And so if we didn't want to snap it, we'd go, I'm not going to pull it anymore because I think it's at its limit, right? But the more we pulled it to its limit, the further we'd be able to go with it a little bit, right? So there's something in that. But to come to the question of, um, is it a skill? Is it a muscle that we can develop? I think that resilience is about resources, right? How do I build resources in my life to be able to deal with the things that I struggle with? So I'm a highly sensitive person, right? I know that about myself. I have enough truth and honesty of who I am. I get overwhelmed very, very quickly. So let me make sure I build processes and resources in my life to be able to deal with that. Yeah, for me, I have to carve that bit of time that I talked about out.
Hmm.
That's who I am. I need, not everybody needs that. Some people are the opposite. I always like bring my wife in here and say she's the opposite. When she's overwhelmed, she needs people around her.
Yeah.
So she builds in a lot of family time. We'll have all of her family over regularly for dinner because that's how she recharges and gets her going. Like when I'm overwhelmed, don't do that, but
Yeah.
bring people around. Yeah. So when we start to build a life full of the resources that we need, right, and the things that we need around us, absolutely our development of our resilience can become stronger. Because when I have that really, really tough day, yeah, I have
Hmm.
patterns and processes that I fall into when I get home because they're naturally built around me. My morning routine is naturally there. It's of healing and restorative nature for me. It's there. It's the like brushing my teeth. It's there.
Hmm.
You know, I like I've got other processes. I'm in a WhatsApp group with two other men, and every Monday morning we do a voice note, all three of us. What's something that I'm scared of this week? What's something that I've struggled with in the previous week, and then any other business. If I'm struggling emotionally, I don't have to reach out because every Monday morning I'm on that WhatsApp and I'm doing that voice note. These things like that I'm building in my life, they're resources, they're building my
Hmm.
resilience. If the metaphoric shit hits the fan tomorrow, there's resources in my life, you know, that help me to build my resilience. If I had none of that and shit hits the fan tomorrow, I don't know what would happen because there's nothing there.
Hmm.
I haven't built that in there. You know, if you go out for a trip, if you were going on a long road trip, you'd have stuff in the car in case you get a puncture, right? You've got your all of that kind of stuff. You've got the people that you would call. You've got some food. You've got blankets in case you break down and it's cold,
Hmm.
right? You've built the resources. You are going on a much more resilient road trip than me, who's getting in a car with nothing. So absolutely, in that case, is something that we can build and develop. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good analogy, and I like the yeah, I like the examples of the WhatsApp group, for example. You're building in elements of accountability in a way,
Yeah.
elements of something you can engage with. So it's not about purposely making life difficult for yourself. It's about putting fail safes in for when it gets difficult. You might not
Exactly.
need it all the time, but let's be honest. What are you struggling with this week? What excites you this week? What do you want to achieve this week?
Yeah.
Lets you lay the land moving forward. I think it's a great example about how you practically not, I guess, improve resilience, but build the fail safes in.
Yeah. And there's a real simple thing that I think people should understand, right? And that is when you ruminate and think about something in your mind, it tends to tangle it up further.
Mm.
When you talk it out, write it down, or take it from here, but externalize it, it tends to untangle it. And I think we often think, well, I don't need to talk about it because all I do is think about it. But when you're thinking about it, it's just tangling up and getting worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just big
When we
ball of spaghetti.
externalize it in some way, that's when we start to untangle it and make sense of it.
Mm. Simple and effective, but that means we have to share our struggle and we have to be confident. And I guess another dreaded word is the vulnerability piece. We have to be more vulnerable and willing to share, not on social if we don't want, but talk to someone, create the
Yeah.
WhatsApp group, find that
Yeah.
space. I think it's some great advice there, Josh, and thanks so much for doing it. I just wanted to ask you one more before we leave, and it's a little off topic, but it's something I saw on your social again around your content. I told you I've been watching your content a little bit. There was a post that said you don't like people. And I just thought in closing, having shared so much insight, why don't you like people, Josh?
Well, look, it's like I said in the video, I absolutely love people and I love being around them until I don't, and then I get overwhelmed and I need
Yeah.
some time on my own. So that, like, people talk about being extroverted and introverted. There's a term, an ambivert, right? And so I love being around people, but and I present as quite extroverted, but I need a lot of time on my own, man. And like, as sort of semi-joking as that post that you saw was, there's some like important truth in that. And that is that I really need to know who I am, right? And
Mm,
I need to be able to boldly go, you know, like in that video, I say, I love people until I don't, and then I hate them. And that's just my truth, you know? And so if I know that about myself, I know that I want to be in the space where I love people as much as I can.
yeah.
So I now know if I go to a social event, I need to build some time in after that. Because if I'm social event all of the time, I'm just going to be hating people all the time. If
Mm.
I'm social event, right now I need a bit of space on my own. Let me not talk to people for a day or two, recharge. Then I can be more in that loving space, you know?
See, so you don't hate people, really.
Depends who I'm with.
Yeah, exactly. I can resonate with that. Josh, how can we connect with you? How can we find out more about your work? Where can we connect? Tell us where people can get more of the work you do.
The best thing to do is go to my website, which is joshconnolly.co.uk. You can pre-order my book now if you go there. And that comes out in July, which I'm very, very excited about. And then I'm very busy on particularly Instagram, which is Josh_FFW. That's where most of my work goes.
Oh, fabulous! And what's the book about, Josh? That's great news.
It's
Congratulations.
called It's Them Not You: How to Break Free from Toxic Parents and Reclaim Your Story. So it's around a lot of the sort of healing work that I do. And yeah, I'm very, very excited about it. And lots to come on that front. I've just announced that it's going to be on Audible as well. So
Oh, fabulous! Well done.
yeah, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, hopefully we can follow up around that, and good luck with it across this summer. Sounds like it's going to be a busy one for you.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Cheers, Josh.